a few, but it's okay. Just drop in as you can. All right, so last week we started John 7, and we worked through about the first half of it. And remember, what was the occasion of the story? What was the big event?
Feast of the Booths.
Feast of Booths, right?
Tabernacles.
Tabernacles, correct. Okay, and where does the story initially take place, and then where does it kind of end up, basically? It ends up in Jerusalem for certain.
Started
It
in
starts
Galilee.
up in Galilee with his brothers, right, in Capernaum, basically. And so it's going to quickly go down to Jerusalem. Let me just recap last week, just so we have it in our minds. I'm just going to read this sheet here. With the Feast of Tabernacles at hand, his brothers urge him to go show himself to the world. Go to Jerusalem, get on the world stage, right? Everybody can see you. Jesus says it's not time for him to go do that. He has a different relationship to the world than anybody else does. And he declines going for a few days. Afterwards, he then heads to the feast incognito. At least he doesn't want to make himself known. He's not broadcasting himself. Presumably it's with the 12 disciples. They're not mentioned in chapter 7 and 8. They will be in 9. So presumably they're there with him. Everyone is looking out for Jesus. The Jews with an intent to harm him. Now the populace has divided opinions about Jesus, but everyone was sort of like hush hush, right? Don't talk about him. At least if you just whisper, don't let them know you're talking about him, because they fear the Jews. But Jesus, when he goes to Jerusalem, is not sort of in a pilgrimage mode, because the Feast of Booths, you can't have these masses from around not just Judea, Galilee, but really the diaspora, those people that were from far away in the Greek lands, basically. So he doesn't go up as a pilgrim. He really goes up there. And when he gets there, what does he do?
When he teaching in the temple.
Yeah, he goes to the temple and he starts teaching. So, it's sort of like, you think he can be low key, and then all of a sudden he just pops up in the temple and starts teaching, which was pretty blatant thing to do, right? And basically, so these people are marveling at his teaching and questioning, how do you know these things? Because they've never heard this type of teaching before. And Jesus basically says, well, if you were obedient to God, means if you were faithful to God, essentially serving him with faith, then you'd be able to tell that what he speaks is from God the Father and not from just a person of his own authority like anybody else. And Jesus then accuses the Jews of trying to kill him. Now the crowd, what do? They deny the claim, right? And they say Jesus is, say again, a demon possessed, right? That's pretty harsh thing to tell Jesus, okay? And then he relates his John 5 miracle to them. Remember the invalid being healed back in John chapter 5 as an act of mercy and healing and perfecting with what was permitted in the Mosaic law, because they're all jumping on Jesus because he healed on the Sabbath, right? That was the big issue. And he tells this guy, pick up your mat and go, okay? That was an abomination to these people. So Jesus then, he logically shows, sort of by an argument, from the lesser to the greater kind of a thing. You're so focused on this idea of circumcision, and what was permitted, it came from Abraham. It wasn't even part of the Mosaic law, but it was incorporated into it because it was an act of mercy, an act of benevolence, of healing, of perfecting something that he brought it in. And it was mandated even for 8th day circumcision, which is when you had to do it on. You did it on the Sabbath, regardless, whether it was Sabbath or not. And Jesus says, here I am, I perfected this person here. His whole body. Circumcision was only ceremonial, but this is a whole body healing in a person's mind. Because you can think, there's a lot more to healing than just simply the body. There's all the trauma you've probably been through and other things like that he had to deal with. So Jesus is basically telling them, I'm not the lawbreaker. You're the lawbreaker. When you get down to it, you're preventing me from doing something good and beneficial, which is obliged for on the Sabbath. So he's saying the Jews were actually the lawbreakers banning such things, and they had no right to be angry about Jesus' actions for that. Any questions on that?
That's going to make it more popular with the crowd. Tell them, you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, you do find that, I was going to mention that, I forgot about it, but you're right. You will see it in the synoptics more, where there are instances where it's sort of like when Jesus sort of gave them the comeuppance. you know, they were like, this is great, kind of, you know, almost like a show sort of a thing. Jesus never looked at it in that fashion, but I think there was some delight amongst the crowd, like in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, when that happened, that, you know, he sort of shunned these religious leaders and all. You don't find that happening in John so much, but yeah, I wanted to comment on that. Thanks for bringing it up. So we look at tabernacle, just real quick, we talked about this last week. What does it prefigure?
God tabernacling with us, God coming to dwell with us.
Right, and this was the grand promise of the Bible, right? This is what Aaron talked about a couple weeks ago. I shall be your God,
You shall
be my people, and I shall dwell in your midst, right? Okay, that was kind of the idea, what tabernacles kind of pictured to the people. As we go to our story today, see if we can get through the rest of the chapter. High hopes, but they usually get dashed when I think of this. I want you to look for the group names that you're gonna find. It's important to the story, and you'll find that it sort of, once you start seeing this, it sort of adds a little bit more depth and dimension to what's happening here. So as we read through, just kind of spot these things here, okay? And then you'll have a better picture of what is actually happening. Okay, so today's read, I'm going to just start, I'll do the first verse, John 7:24, and then we'll get to our others momentarily. Jesus, to finish up last week, we didn't get to that. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. And Jesus concludes his speech from last time. Jesus tells the Jews not to judge by external appearances, but by a righteous judgment. T.A. Carson, he writes, if their approach to God's will were one of faith, they would discern that Jesus is not a Sabbath breaker, but the one who fulfills both the Sabbath and circumcision requirements of the law. So they had misjudged Jesus based on their own superficial and flawed understanding of the law and not the lawgiver. They operated on the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law, right? Okay, so I'm just wondering, how does Jesus' words in this idea of don't, as far as judgment, do a right judgment and not just judge by appearances? Do we need to take that to heart?
Of
Yeah,
course.
we really do, huh? Because it can be so. I mean, you drive up to a stoplight intersection in Austin, you know, and they got homeless people there with the signs and all, and it's just so easy to just sort of think about, you lazy bum, you ought to be out there working, get a job, kind of a thing, and right? And we don't know the circumstances, of course, things of that nature. So we can easily just have prejudice in our hearts towards people. It's just our background and things like that. We just don't think, maybe you're having a bad day and just want to, you know, give somebody else, make my day, kind of a thing.
That great philosopher, Bo Diddley, who said you can't judge a book by looking at its cover.
Yeah.
The song.
Yeah, exactly right.
That dates me a lot. Nobody's.
Yeah.
Who is Bo?
And Joe, you know, you know, he has all this stuff happening to him. And all the people are sitting there going, well, what did you do? What sin did you commit?
Right.
You know, and he's like,
spit it out, come on, Ford.
And it was like, you know, you pass judgment on me and yet you don't know.
Right.
You show me, you know, you're reproving me, but what have I done?
Right. That's not to say, I mean, all of our, practically every hour of our day, we're spent in some fashion doing some type of judgment. It's not necessarily a prejudicial kind of a thing in terms of an evil judgment, but we're deciding what we're going to do with our time, with our resources and so forth like that. I mean, or, you know, how you're going to spend your money, or you're going to have your kids do this type of athletic type, you know, activity rather than another. We're always making judgment. That doesn't mean that they're all evil. Jesus is just simply make it a righteous judgment. Make it true and correct. Don't be an evil judgment, as these guys had done, where they had twisted the law and so forth. So something to take to heart for us. All right, getting back to next in our story here. What I'm going to ask, I'm going to go around the back way here. I'm going to ask Nolan, start off with 25 and 31, Mary Ann, Veronica, Garrett, Steffi, and then we'll do the rest. Go ahead.
Some of the people of Jerusalem were therefore said, is not this the man whom they seek to kill? And here he is speaking openly, and they say nothing to him. Can it be that the authorities really know that this is the Christ? But we know where this man comes from. And when the Christ appears, no one will know where he comes from. So Jesus proclaimed as he taught in the temple, you know me, and you know where I come from, but I have not come up of my own accord. He who sent me is true, and him you do not know. I know him, for I come from him, and he sent me. So they were seeking to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him, because his hour had not yet come. Yet many of the people believed in him. They said, when the Christ appears, will he do more signs than this man has done?
Do you want me to take the The Pharisees heard the crowd muttering these things about him, and the chief priests and the Pharisees sent officers to arrest him. Jesus then said, I will be with you a little longer, and then I am going to him who sent me. You will seek me, and you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come. The Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go that we will not find him? Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? What does he mean by saying, you will seek me and you will not find me, and where I am you cannot come?
On the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. Now this he said about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive. For as yet the Spirit had not yet been given, because Jesus was not yet glorified.
When they heard these words, some of the people said, this really is the prophet. Others said, this is the Christ. But some said, is the Christ to come from Galilee? Has not the scripture said that the Christ comes from the offspring of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David was? So there was a division among the people over him. Some of them wanted to arrest him, but no one laid hands on him.
The officers then came to the chief priests and Pharisees, who said to them, why did you not bring him? The officers answered, no one ever spoke like this man. The Pharisees answered them, have you also been deceived? Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd that does not know the law is accursed. Nicodemus, who had gone to him before, and who was one of them, said to them, does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? They replied, are you from Galilee too? Search and see that no prophet arises from Galilee.
Okay, so as you read this, I'm hoping you might have just sort of, as some of the words were read, you might have seen some of the groups pop up in terms of, not these guys here, but the Jews, the people of the crowd, people of Jerusalem, Pharisees, chief priests, and so forth like that. We'll go through that more in depth here, but that's our narrative for today. It starts off with some of the people of Jerusalem. Now remember when Jesus was accused of a demon, who accused him then? It was the crowd,
Sure.
okay? It was the crowd, so I'm drawing a distinction between what we would call the crowd, sort of, you'll see words like people or multitude, depending on your translation, and this is just sort of like the big group, I think, which is really more indicative of the out-of-towners, the visitors, you might say, who are drawing from all this huge crowd, this mass of people, the throngs. It was a lot more of these out-of-towners. But then in this verse, what does this verse start off with in verse 25?
Some of the people of Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. You see, there's a distinction there, okay? This is now the in-towners, all right? This is the guys who are a bit more familiar with things associated with but they're not the elites, they're not the Jews, so to speak, that we're gonna find talked about, but it's different than the out-of-towners, okay? They're more knowledgeable about this heated friction between Jesus and the Pharisee crowd and all, so they're sort of in on it a little bit, but look at what they say. Is not this the man whom they seek to kill? So, first of all, they address Jesus as what? As merely a man, okay? So they're sort of, they don't recognize him as even a prophet or anything of that sort of nature. They just denigrate him to the point that they can without being outright, blasphemous. But at any rate, it's sort of like saying, isn't this the dude they want to, okay, that they intend to kill? And so, and now they're basically complaining about it. Here he is speaking openly, right? They're saying nothing to him. So they're sort of upset, and so can it be that the authorities really know that this is the Christ? And so the idea of this is that they're wondering, why this delay? Okay, Jesus is here to teach. Why isn't anybody putting a stop to it? Okay, so they're I think they're chatting among themselves. They're not, they're sort of like you want to chat amongst yourself to be heard, but not necessarily do something yourself as yet. Okay, but they want to know why the leaders were silent, and so they're pondering, are the leaders, maybe they're thinking that this guy really is the Christ. I mean, that's what they're ultimately saying. Maybe they're having second thoughts on who Jesus is. So, but it seems like as far as the authorities, these people of Jerusalem, they were not the temple authorities. We'll find them out momentarily. But the authorities did not do anything to stop Jesus at this point. And it's possible, maybe they just, the authorities wanted to sort of let things play out. Let's see where it goes a bit, you know. Or maybe they did have a few second thoughts. We're not told, we don't know. Okay, but there was delay in here.
It was also not his time, so they couldn't have done anything.
Well, yes, exactly. The Jerusalemites were troubled that no one was intervening with Jesus, but again, it was not his time, as obviously we'll see momentarily. Verse 27, it says, but we know where this man comes from, and when the Christ appears, no one will know where he comes from.
Now, I don't understand that. There was all these prophecies about the Messiah, that where he would come from. And so why do they say no one will know where he comes from?
A very good question. Indeed, it sort of shows their ignorance. It should have had something, because it seriously, Micah 5:2 gave them, some. I mean, even when Jesus was born, you remember with King Herod and all. I mean, at the time he seeks his wise men. Where is he to be born? In Bethlehem of Judea. So they go over there and they, of course,
So why do they not know? Why did they say he's from Nazareth and not from Bethlehem?
You know, that is a good question, and I can only assume that they didn't care. They didn't want to seek it. They weren't interested in finding out more about it.
Well, that had happened a long time ago. It might not have been common knowledge that he was born in Bethlehem, because
but I mean, we'll see in the next chapter that they sort of accuse his mother of adultery. You might, essentially, we'll find that out in the next chapter. But yeah, good question, Peggy. I don't know why they didn't. Maybe they just didn't care or didn't want.
Because he said, "Does anything good come from Nazareth?" You know, they assume that he is from Nazareth.
That was one of his disciples. Yeah.
But that's where he
his brother,
lived
wasn't
most
it?
of his life. I
No,
mean,
that
he
was
was
his
only
brother.
in Bethlehem for up to 2 years, right? Because
Yeah, right. Sure.
he
Around
left
there,
and went to
dealing with
Egypt.
that, and then they went to Nazareth and all. Yeah. I don't have an answer for you. I'd like to know. All right, so then we find out, there should have been clear, but there is this debate between what's called the prophet and Christ. And, there seems like they're almost these sort of mystical figures. I mean, the Christ, would be a son of David, but there just seems to be, Moses prophesied in Deuteronomy 18, verse 15, about a prophet who, like me, will arise, okay? And it's just sort of this mysterious Old Testament figure. And they sort of debate, is it the Christ or the prophet? And there just seems to be a lot of confusion over that, and nobody knows exactly. And so they just sort of, debate over that right there. But they should have known of his earthly roots. They knew of his earthly roots as far as Galilee. They didn't take into consideration his Judean birth, but no one really knew of his heavenly origin, obviously. So, and John will incorporate a lot of irony into his gospel. So we see here, they think they know everything they need to know about Jesus, but they're completely ignorant of his heavenly origin, as we, obviously, us, as we know. All right, so in verse 28, so Jesus proclaimed as he taught in the temple, "You know me, and you know where I come from, but I have not come of my own accord. He who sent me is true, and him you do not know. I know him, for I come from him. He sent me." So Jesus is still teaching in the temple. And I think we look at this as basically kind of like, he arrives there probably in the middle of the week and then starts teaching. So for several days he's going to be teaching before the end of the feast. And he says, "My teaching is not mine, but him who sent me." And when he says he proclaimed, the idea there, I think he's sort of like he's crying out. And these people may not have said this about where he came from. They may have been, in other words, Jesus didn't necessarily audibly hear it. But we know Jesus does not necessarily need to audibly hear something to know what people are thinking, right? So he cries out and he says, You know me. I think this, he's sort of testifying to, yeah, you got this superficial knowledge. You got me. I came from from Galilee, sort of like, but with the idea behind it, you don't know me in reality. You just know this superficial knowledge of me. And he doesn't really correct them on their thinking, because I think there's always a certain amount of mysteriousness Jesus wants to leave with a lot of these people. He doesn't want to. It's interesting, when he was with the Samaritan woman, was he pretty crystal clear? I mean, he spoke to her in the figurative language about water and the Spirit and so forth like that. But when it came to revealing who he was he pretty clear about it? He was very clear. He said, when the Christ comes, he'll tell us all these things. And what does he tell her? I who am speaking to you am he. No questions. Okay, he never does that with anyone else, interestingly. But it's always sort of in this roundabout way that, he reveals it. So, but anyway, he says, last week he disclaimed his teaching authority. Remember, he said, my teaching is not my own, okay? Meaning it came from somebody else. Because if he just said, it's my own, then they would just say, well, that's what you're thinking. You're not representing anybody other than yourself. So this week, he's sort of disclaiming responsibility for his mission. He says, I did not come of my own accord, my own sort of authority, my own purposes. I came on behalf of somebody else. And
But he came willingly.
he did come willingly, absolutely.
And that's a big, he didn't come because he wanted to come.
Right, and he
but
wasn't forced to come, I guess you could say that, right? Yeah.
He was asked to come.
Right. I mean, that's the way that we picture in our minds how we would handle the Trinitarian conversation, we might say. Yeah, right.
He drew the short stick.
Peggy. All right. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So he says, he who sent me is true. I think it might be better understood to us, maybe he who sent me is real. Okay, meaning this is not some made up thing I'm talking about. This is a real personness that I'm talking about in terms of the Father. So they didn't know who the Father was. They thought they did, of course. And so just returns us to that closing line in the prologue of John, chapter 1, verse 18, where he says, no one has ever seen God, the only begotten God who is at the Father's side, he has made him known. The idea there is, again, you can't know the Father unless you go through Jesus. That's the only way you'll ever get to the Father. Okay? Now it's interesting because he says in verse 29, it's talking about his heavenly origins, I know him, for I come from him, and he sent me. I want to look at that little phrase, for I come from him. Now, we could just simply mean as, okay, I was near him, so to speak, and then he sent me. But I think there's something deeper there, and I think this goes back to the metaphysical reality of the existence of Jesus. It's, when we are talked about the eternal generation of the Son, I think this is kind of another one of those verses that just sort of shows it, and not really overtly clear, but just says it in passing, but it is referencing it. And then there's the eternal generation of the Son. I won't spend time talking about it today because we've done it many times before, but it is something that I think does reference it. And obviously is sent by the Father to accomplish the Father's purposes. In verse 30, they were seeking to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. So they were seeking to arrest him. Who's the they?
The Pharisees.
No, not yet.
Oh, you think the people?
I think it was these Jerusalemites. They're starting to take things into their own hands. That's kind of what it seems like. As best as because the authorities come in the next verse. So I think they're just sort of acting out of their own. Hey, they're not going to do anything. I guess we'll do something. So that's what I think. But they were completely powerless to stop him. How could they be powerless? I mean, was there a force field around Jesus? Was it his disciples? I don't think they doubled as bodyguards. I just don't.
They want to
think
take.
they were that.
It's just like his time is not yet come, and that's.
Right. I mean, because it's sort of, you would read another passage, he slipped away from them, and so to speak. I mean, it's sort of eerie, uncanny how these, how does Jesus sort of how does he get away, so to speak, or how are they not able to do such things as that? And whether or not you go back to the story of Genesis 19, remember when the angels were there and they blinded people who were trying to accost the Lot and the angels there, and they just blinded everybody, and it's just, we don't know. I'd be curious to know, how does that happen? That they just have no power. They're completely, disabled in order to do something like that.
It's like, being forced incompetence on people, right? So it's like they want to do something, but they don't have the ability to group together enough to do it.
Right. I know. Did you bring the handcuffs? No, I thought you were gonna do it. I don't know. But it's just sort of like like the Keystone Cops kind of a thing. They just, they
Well,
can't
it's
seem
like
to do anything.
we get the behind the curtain view, obviously. We
Yeah.
know the reason why it's not happening.
Yeah.
Because it's not his time. So I think it's really neat because it just reminds us how God works in the world, because we don't have the bird's eye view to see
Yeah.
what the future is supposed to be, or how, when we look at all these events that happen in our own lives and in our country and just where, in all scenarios, what we're seeing, we are seeing God's will being played out, but we don't know ultimately the future, what God's will is and purposes, or how he's gonna go about accomplishing
Right.
that.
Yeah, what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so we're seeing this, like, we know.
We're seeing it from the
this
ground
time's
level,
not-
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we're
yeah.
like, okay, so it's very encouraging, really, because, when you see people acting a certain way, and you're like, why?
Right.
Why is it going this way? Why couldn't this, and even our personal lives?
Right.
Because God's orchestrating it to be in a certain way, and it is a very supernatural thing. It doesn't, sometimes it's against
Yeah.
logic.
Yeah.
There's a supernatural power, a
Right.
force here.
Right, because you see sort of the basic providence of things that sort of line up in certain ways that, cause certain events to happen.
Yeah, if they're not called. I mean, we've been talking about that. If God hadn't called him, and God's in the midst of everyone right now, and you often go, how do they not see?
Yeah.
I mean, today, it's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Right.
Well, the other thing is, in the next sentence, it's going to talk about, many believed. So, there wasn't a consensus in the crowd. Probably a bunch of people believed, bunch didn't, and
Right.
so it might not have been like they had enough
Support to
people,
get everybody.
yeah.
Maybe so. We don't know what the full thing was, whether it was sort of a supernatural, so to speak, intervention, miraculous kind of a thing, or just sort of an arrangement of circumstances that on the surface we would say, it's just, I don't see anything miraculous about it, but in reality there was.
And we like to say, I must be pretty perceptive because I see. God's like, no.
Right.
We wouldn't have seen either.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the circumstances of how everything, he didn't go right away.
Yeah,
But then he
exactly.
shows up.
Right.
And,
Right.
he knew that when he was supposed to show up,
Yeah.
and he knew when he was supposed
Yeah.
to leave.
Absolutely, and but it says, he avoided going down to Judea at the start of the chapter because the Jews were going to kill him. It wasn't that he was afraid; it was simply that it wasn't the right time. And, so in this case, it said he's untouchable because his hour had not yet come. He knew that, and it's just something that we're all fearful of things, and of course, in our normal state of mind about events and things. But Jesus exactly had his mind totally set on doing the Father's will. So there's the Father's sovereign decree would set Jesus' arrest and crucifixion as scheduled. It wasn't going to be according to man, ultimately. And the next verse says in verse 31, yet many of the people believed in him. They said, when the Christ appears, will he do more signs than this man has done? So we're back to
The signs.
the crowd, right? Not the Jerusalemites, okay? So again, to go through this story, just sort of make these little notable distinctions that who's being talked about at the time.
Why do
So,
you say that? Because of many of the people?
Many of the people, many of the crowd believed
Well, it
him.
says people of Jerusalem. I couldn't have
Is that what
many
yours
of the.
says?
No, it just says many of the people, but I mean,
Right.
I don't know where you get where it's a different
Well, 'cause
people than the
that-
people
again-
of Jerusalem.
Because that's what I'm saying.
Don't be difficult.
Okay.
It could be, okay? Again, it's a little ambiguous for
Because
the.
it's in the same chapter,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Now, it says here that yet many of the people believed in him.
Yes.
And then it says, they said when the Christ appeared.
Yes.
So did they not believe he was the Christ? What did they believe in?
Well, this is exactly right, Peggy. They said, because this is why they believe him, because they said, when the Christ appears, is he going to do more signs than this one? person has done. So the idea is it gives them a rationale. It gives them a reason. This must be
This
the
is
Christ.
the Christ,
Right.
okay.
Right, because
okay.
of the things he's done. Exactly.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
They can't be a Christ 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. So the many within supposedly this visitor group, I'm saying, but it could be the Jerusalemites. I'm not gonna stand and die on that hill. But it's interesting because they talk about the signs, but there are no signs that are specifically mentioned in John chapter 7 or 8. It comes to chapter 9, the healing of the blind man, that we find a miracle. Otherwise, we're back in John chapter 5. It's possible Jesus had done some miracles during the teaching in the temple. We don't know. It doesn't say.
Well, that's why I'm thinking they're more the people of Jerusalem, because they would have known of the miracles he's been doing around them.
Okay.
Since the history, you know?
All right. You
Hey.
teach the class. That's a good point. Okay.
That's a
But
very
again,
good point.
yeah. But he also did miracles up there in Galilee for a
Yes.
long time. So
You're
yeah,
both
that's
right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I like that. Give us both an award.
Okay.
Okay. It's already observed in John's gospel that belief based on signs, it tends to be kind of a shaky one. It's not something you want to set your belief totally rest upon. But it is better than no faith at all. So if you have to use the miracles to justify it, that's fine. In fact, as we read in John chapter 10, 37 to 38, and then Jason will take the next one.
If I am not doing the works of my Father, then do not believe me. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me, and I am in the Father.
So believe the work. If you can't decide anything else, just let the works tell you what I'm doing. Has anybody else ever been able to do this? Jason?
Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Or else believe on account of the works themselves.
Jesus said this to his disciples in the upper room. Believe on the works if you have to, but hopefully that's not the basis of necessarily your faith, but don't let it not be if that's all you have, okay? Interestingly, there is no explicit text in the Old Testament that says the Messiah was going to come and do any miraculous healings. There's nothing in there that attests to that. So it is something that was dramatic and new to them in terms of this understanding. So okay, verse 32. The Pharisees, are we talking about new people here now? Is this a different group that we've come to today? Yes. But the Pharisees, I'm going to say they're part of the Jews. Unfortunately, my ink pen kind of ran out there. The Pharisees, the chief priests, officers, they're really all part of this Jews. When it talks about the Jews, they're part of that group there. But sometimes it will break them out into a very specific entity of that group, a subgroup, okay? The Pharisees heard the crowd, okay? So, and they're figuring, it is time to act. Things are getting out of hand here. The crowd is falling for Jesus, okay? They don't want him thinking like he's the Messiah, because the Messiah brings in ideas of political sort of things and aspirations, and now we've got an issue on our hands with the politics of things. So they're muttering. Again, we saw last week, it really is better whispering, kind of that idea there. Perhaps maybe their delay was they wanted a favorable time to strike. The situation was getting out of hand. And it's not like these guys, these Pharisee, chief priests, officers, they really cared about each other. But you got a common enemy, you can band together and you can collaborate, right? We've seen that in the world all the time, of course. So the chief priests it's like the sect of the Sadducees, and the Sadducees were sort of I'm not going to say secular, but they only believed in like the first 5 books of the Bible. They didn't believe in the resurrection and things like that we see from the synoptics. Okay, and then they were concerned with temple worship and revenue. The officers were like the temple guards, and you may find guards in your particular translation, and they were drawn from the Levites. They weren't like, maybe they were kind of like, big buffy guys or something, I don't know, but they sort of tried to keep things under control. The Romans, they couldn't have cared less of what happened in the temple. Unless things got into a riot, we wash our hands of this thing. We don't want anything to do with it. So, in verse 33, Jesus says, I will be with you a little longer, and then I'm going to go to him who sent me. You will seek me, and you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come. It's in verse 33, it starts, It's better, I think, in the New American Standard, therefore. So as a result of them trying to arrest them, Jesus basically says this. He says, as a consequence of the policing action, and Jesus is addressing the Jews here who are seeking his abduction, okay? I will be with you a little longer. What is he kind of talking about there?
That his time is coming.
Yes.
It's not gonna be much longer.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't specify.
No,
It's gonna be,
but he knows it's real close.
yeah, 6 months is really the timetable that we're looking at here. And he said it's gonna be a little bit longer. It's not, he doesn't specify explicitly, I'm going to die. He just sort of said, leaves, again, a lot of this sort of mystery kind of behind some of the sayings, be enigmatic to cause a lot of pondering and thought behind what he wants to tell you. So, you know, you could say, is he being kind of coy? And I'd say, well, perhaps. And, you know, again, if he started talking about his death, then that may not have been the good thing to talk about then and there, you know, since people wanted to kill him anyway, as you know. So he's just sort of being coy about it and just saying, not gonna be here, I'm not gonna be around much longer. Now he says, I'm going to him who sent me, meaning he is returning back to his place in glory with the Father, ultimately, right? Now, they don't know exactly what that means to them. He says, you will seek me and you will not find me. So, sort of like giving the order of the statement, okay? He says, I'm not gonna be here that much longer. I'm going back to the one who sent me. You're going to seek me, but you're not going to find me. So, it's sort of the indication is there, since we know he is going to die, that's going to be part of this, what he's really saying here, is what does he mean by saying, you will seek me and not find me? Is he sort of saying like, you're going to wish you could find my body post-resurrection to disprove what I'm saying? Or is it they'll earnestly be seeking the Messiah, but not be able to obtain his help? Which one do you think it could be?
Could be both.
Sorry?
I said it could be both, but, you know, he says the same thing to the disciples in John 13 about, you know, I'm gonna be with you for a little while and you will seek me, and
You're
as I
stealing
said to
thunder.
the Jews,
Stop.
okay, I'm sorry.
Stealing thunder. Okay.
That was my teaching coming up.
Garrett? What were you saying there?
I was just saying it sounds more like a ladder.
It does. I think that's what he's saying. I mean, ultimately, they would, of course, never find his body, but the point is, he's basically telling them, you're gonna wish that you and me were friends, so to speak, you know, that I was going to help you. That's ultimately what he's getting at. When we look at it, Jesus, it's better understood as they're not gonna be seeking his life to kill him, but as seeking for his help. There's an implicit threat and warning behind this passage, understood in both the temporal and the eternal, so the current time and the future. If you look at Luke 17, did I put that up? Luke 17:22, Peggy?
And he said to the disciples, the days are coming when you will desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it.
Okay. And he's talking to his disciples, okay? Days are coming when you desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it. I'm not gonna get into exactly what it is, but it's sort of the idea that saying you're gonna want to see him, okay? Now, if we look at the more eternal spiritual destruction idea, John 8:21, I want Brent to...
Luke.
John or Luke?
Luke.
Luke, sorry.
Okay.
No, make it John, sorry, bad me.
Golly, I turned all the way back there. All right, now, John 8:21.
Yeah.
Okay. He said therefore again to them, I go away and you shall seek me, and shall die in your sin. Where I am going, you cannot come.
So this is sort of repeating this phrase, but he's adding a little bit more detail. He's talking to the Jews in John chapter 8. We'll get there, you know, in a week or two, so to speak. He says, I am going away and you will seek me. And what? You will
Die.
die in your sin.
So they'll never come to God.
Sorry?
They'll never come to God, is
Yeah,
basically
exactly.
what he's saying.
That's horrific. It's sort of like, it's trying to tell, you got a window of opportunity here in one sense. I mean, you have a lifetime, you have a window of your entire life to come to Christ, but your opportunity may be limited just because of your own hardness of heart and you're not, you know, rejecting the Lord, listening to you. There's a number of verses that just kind of speak to this idea of, you know, come when you can. 2 Corinthians, Isaiah 55:6. Seek the Lord while he may be found, and call upon him while he is near. Dale?
For he says, in a favorable time I listened to you, and in a day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the favorable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation.
The idea there is now, do it now. You don't know what's going to come tomorrow, right? The events, we don't know. Luke 19:43 to 44.
John 12.
Sorry. John, yeah, this guy right here.
So Jesus said to them, the light is among you for a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. The one who walks in the darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of light.
So the walk in the, while you got the light, okay? While the light is shining for you to guide you, follow it, okay? Don't avoid it and ignore it. And Luke 19, you feel like reading there, Heather?
Yeah, is it, what is it, 43 and
43, 44.
For the day shall come upon you, that the enemy shall cast a trench about you and keep us around, and keep thee on every side. And shall lay even with the ground, and the children within you, and they shall not leave, and one stone upon another, because you knew not the time of my visitation.
The idea that the time of my visitation, there's this period of time when Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of God in the incarnated form, was before them, and you chose to ignore it. You did the time of my visitation, and you didn't listen. So there's a period of time that, you know, we are available to us, so to speak, when we're ought to listen to the Lord.
It reminds me of what Jesus said to Nicodemus when he said, whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe in him is condemned already.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. He says then, where I am, you cannot come. This is going to refer, of course, Jesus is going to be in glory, in heavenly glory, and the Jews would, because they would not come, be their ultimate loss. This reminds me of, remember the parable of the rich man and Lazarus? And what happened in that parable?
Well, Lazarus was sweating in hell, and he said, if I can't get saved, at least go back and tell my brothers.
Yeah, and just anything to add?
Then, yeah, he's like, they already know, they should.
Yeah, and there was a gap, right? You can't get from one place between the two places. It's like, I can't get to you. I can't give you a drop of water for your tongue, so to speak. There's no way between us. There's a huge gap, and that's the idea here. Is that
He also said that he had already sent, and they didn't believe.
Yeah, the prophets and everything.
Yeah,
they already had given
exactly right.
evidence.
They had all the evidence they needed, right? But they chose to ignore it. They chose to not listen to it. So, and interesting, the night before the crucifixion, Jesus uses, this might be what you're getting at there, John 13:33. Nolan, you want to read?
Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come.
So he's saying the same thing to the disciples. Is he going to abandon the disciples in the same way? No, because we find, you might have to jump to verse 14. Since you're there, Nolan, just read 14, 1 to 3.
Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may also be.
Okay, so you get the idea. He's not abandoning them. He's going to come and bring them back to himself. But he's not going to do that with the unbelievers. Verse 35, the Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go that we will not find him? Now, which group is saying this?
The Jews.
The Jews, okay? We're talking about the elite guys, Pharisees, chief priests, and so forth like that, okay? Where does he intend to go that we're not going to find him? Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? What does he mean by saying you'll seek me and not find me? Where I am, you cannot come. So it just shows this verse that there's continued sort of misunderstanding of what he's getting at, and because of Jesus, in a way, sort of mysterious, enigmatic word phrasing, and it's sort of, I think you can see, you know, their hostility, their hatred, their blind hatred is just causing them to just, they will not understand anything he says. and it's affecting their thinking. So the leaders, they discuss among themselves what Jesus' words mean, right? They figure, well, he must mean he's going to leave Palestine. He's going to go on a trip somewhere. Okay, he's going to go on a cruise or whatever. He must be leaving and heading out to the Gentile lands. What was the diaspora or the dispersion? Anybody know what that was?
That was when they were captured and.
Well, that was the Jews who kind of came back from Babylon necessarily. They didn't all go back to Judea, but many of them scattered in the different regions throughout, the Greek and Roman Empire lands. So, but they still held on to their Jewishness, and so they figure he's going to leave here and he's going to go bother those people, right? And then they thought, well, maybe he'll just go to the Jewish synagogues and then he's going to teach the Greeks from there. So he's going to go and not only teach Jews, he's going to teach Greeks. And this is the irony of the book of John, because it actually becomes truthful. It's almost a prophecy that they're saying, because what happens? This method is exactly how Jesus uses via the apostles to spread the gospel and expand the kingdom. What does Paul normally do when he goes to these different places? He goes to the synagogue, right, and talks to the Jews. And from that, ultimately, it spreads out into the Greek land. So it's just sort of interesting how there is this manifestation. There's this irony, what they're saying actually comes true, and they're unwittingly doing it. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'll give this a good stopping point and ask if any questions or comments, anything?
My comment is, this whole study today, talk about all these groups of people, the multitude, the crowd, the Jews, the families that were all there, talking about what if. Well, no, it's not. Yes, it is. Could it be? We've never heard this before. He's a fake. All of these things today is what a non-believer will face someday, and has each of us today. We've gone through this individually, and that was a mass of the crowd, but this is an individual battle. Every person has to answer for himself at one point, because Christ will not always be there pulling you, trying to get you to come to him. And so if you reject him, then that was your choice.
Yeah, that's a good
The
point.
availability is always there, but if you reject him.
Right. We see this sort of the whole variety, the spectrum of the attitudes towards Jesus is what all people groups have. Either they sort of love him or hate him. They find, they're difficult to believe at times, and then they'll read the stories of, this is where the gospel narratives are so important, that we find out who Jesus really is, and then we can base our faith upon the word of God. Yeah.
So some members of a family will receive, some will reject of an individual family.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's difficult, but once you see the light and experience it, you would never want to go back. And you don't quite understand why some of your brothers or sisters would reject this. But this goes on every day, though.
It's important to also just continue to reaffirm, just continue to feed ourselves on the content of the scriptures, so that we understand and have greater faith as we go along.
And that's why it's important too that we really adhere to the word and protect the authority of the word, because the religious leaders were so far off, and there's religious leaders today that are so far off, that are spouting that they are believers or whatever, but they're teaching things that are contrary to the Bible. And that's the sign. I mean, you have to look at that. There were some probably Jewish Pharisees and priests that were, like Nicodemus was open to Jesus and stuff like that.
And we're going to cover that today. That'll be for next week. We'll include that. But good point. The whole business of Nicodemus comes back at the end of this chapter. He's back at the forefront. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Let's pray. Father God, we thank